Black Op Radio presents 50 Reasons for 50 Years. Postscript, 1968.
Do they know about Martin Luther King?
We have left it up to you to look at.
Could you lower those signs, please? I have some very sad news for all of you, and that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis. Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in.
By the spring of 1968, things were heating up all across the world with waves of protest, assassinations, and political realignments. Everywhere, it seemed, the established order was being challenged. Robert Kennedy, who reduced his public profile after the death of his brother, had just reluctantly returned to campaigning, perhaps not fully aware of the extent that he was truly a man for the time. As author Lisa Pease explained to Black Op Radio.
These were people who were savvy. Remember, they came from a bootlegging family. They knew they knew how the game was played. Bobby especially was kind of the straight-laced one. He actually was very devout Catholic, loved going to church, quote the scripture, argue with priests. Jackie used to call Bobby the saint because he was just, he was really serious about doing the right thing. And his views of right and wrong became a lot more nuanced, I think, after his brother's death. And, things weren't quite as easily black and white as they were before that death.
Bobby Kennedy was kind of the last strong liberal on the political scene in America. At that time, not counting his opponent, Eugene McCarthy.
I intend to enter the Democratic primaries in 4 states, Wisconsin, Oregon, California, and Nebraska. The decision with reference to Massachusetts and also New Hampshire will be made within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Out of loyalty to the Democratic Party, Robert Kennedy was not going to directly challenge incumbent President Lyndon Johnson. But when Eugene McCarthy stepped forward to do just that, a carefully maintained political alignment was upended. And suddenly, issues like the Vietnam War were front and center. McCarthy's initial success and Johnson's surprise withdrawal opened the door for Bob Kennedy to make a late challenge.
Good morning, Senator. What do you think about the surprising showing of Senator McCarthy yesterday?
Well, I think it indicates that there's a good deal of concern about even within the Democratic Party across the United States, there's a good deal of concern about the direction in which the country is moving.
Do you see this as a defeat for the president in New Hampshire?
Well, I don't know that I'd add anything to what I said. I think that there is concern within the Democratic Party.
Bobby didn't want to run for president that year initially. He didn't want to split the party. That was his key thing. He didn't want to take votes away from Johnson, even though he wholly opposed what Johnson was doing in Vietnam. But he was worried if he did that, he would fracture the party and it might not recover. When Senator Eugene McCarthy jumped into the race, the party was already in danger of being fractured. And so then Kennedy's question was, if the party's going to be split anyway, who would be the better president? And he felt that he would make a better president than Eugene McCarthy would, and that's why he entered the race.
Well, Senator, when you say that you are reassessing your position, do you mean that you're considering challenging the president for the Democratic nomination?
Well, I'm reassessing my position as to whether I will run against President Johnson.
Johnson stepped down and said he would not run for re-election. There's no more reason for him not to enter the race at that point. And when Bobby entered, the left did not immediately run to embrace it. The left had already fallen from some of the CIA's lies about the Kennedys and stuff that had been in the press at the time. He really tried to make the world a better place in a way that almost no politician ever does. He really honestly felt it. It wasn't a cynical ploy to get elected.
It's not just the poor who are suffering. It's not just those who want a better education who are suffering.
It's not only those who need jobs and employment who are suffering, but the whole country is suffering, and I don't think any of us can be satisfied, or happy, or contented, or filled with joy while that war goes on and while that money is being spent and American lives are being lost in the devastation of Vietnam.
Bob Kennedy was going to do several things. He was going to reopen the investigation of the assassination of his brother. He was going to end the oil depletion allowance, which was a major platform position that would have greatly hit the oil companies in the United States. He was going to end the Vietnam War at that point in time. There are indications of clearly that he was going to, back then, begin the normalization process of relations with Cuba. He was going to go in a totally different direction in terms of the social economic needs of the masses of people in this country, and would have been a vibrant force for continuation, rejuvenation of democracy.
What all of these primaries have indicated, it was the people in the Democratic Party and the people in the United States wanted change, and that change can come about only if those who are delegates in Chicago recognize the importance of what has happened here in the state of California, what has happened in South Dakota, what happened in New Hampshire, what happened across the rest of this country. The country wants to move in a different direction. We want to deal with our own problems within our own country, and we want peace in Vietnam. And that what has been going on within the United States over the period of the last 3 years, the divisions, the violence, the disenchantment with our society, the divisions, whether it's between blacks and whites, between the poor and the more affluent, or between age groups, or on the war in Vietnam, that we can start to work together. We are a great country and a selfish country, compassionate country, and I intend to make that my basis for running and over the period of the next few months. So, my thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. Thank you very
much. Kennedy has just won the California primary, and he's got all kinds of ballast now behind him. He's essentially vanquished Eugene McCarthy. Hubert Humphrey is unpopular because of his attachment to the Vietnam War. Robert Kennedy has been out against the war for several months now. And it now looks like the Kennedy machine is going to go into Chicago and blow out Humphrey. And he's going to win the nomination. And it's a really joyful occasion.
He was on the verge, so we all believe, of being elected president. The country, and indeed the world, would have been a different place had he been elected. But the ruling forces of the society decided that that was not going to be the case. They took the culminating action, which was to eliminate him from the scene.
A doctor! We need a doctor right here to the microphone, please, immediately.
Stay tuned for the next installment, Postscript 1968.